Hello, let's talk mindset again. So I've decided I'm going to try to do one mindset video every week. So far we talked a little bit about maybe starting a food journal or upping your NEAT through more walking. That was week 1. Week 2 was on the idea of kind of using your behavior to cast votes for your future self or make deposits in the kind of person you want to become. And then last week we talked about the many benefits of journaling for your health, and there's a blog post that goes along with that one, so be sure to go back and check those out. Now this week I wanted to talk a bit about getting comfortable with uncertainty. I think right now is a very uncertain time. Almost the only thing that's certain right now is that everything is uncertain, and we don't really know exactly what's coming in our world. So, what can we do about that? Because I don't think we can really underestimate how low our human tolerance is for discomfort. And maybe the most uncomfortable thing for us is to be uncertain and have unknowns about the future. And right now, that's all we have. Anytime I ask anybody what the plan is moving forward for life, they almost invariably answer, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. We'll see. It is what it is. Any number of statements like that show that we just have no control over the situation. We don't know when we will. We don't know when things will go back to normal, or maybe they'll never go back to normal. Maybe we'll have to create a new normal. What will that look like? So regardless, since we are in that uncomfortable place, how do we kind of get comfortable in that uncomfortable, uncertain area? It makes us feel really vulnerable, right? So usually when we feel vulnerable, we just want to kind of get away from that feeling as quick as possible. But if we can actually learn to sit with that vulnerability and kind of feel out the edges of it, since we're going to be with it for a long term, we might as well make friends with it. That can be really valuable. So what I want to talk about this week in regards to getting comfortable with uncertainty is meditation. Now, kind of like journaling, you might be like, oh man, really? She's going to talk about meditation? Like, everybody's always saying I should meditate, and I've tried it, and I hate it, and it doesn't work for me. Or, I don't know. I don't know what you're thinking, but I know I used to feel that way, and I know I had tried it over and over again in different ways, and it never seemed like it worked for me. But I have found when I know like there's research on something that shows it's good for you, and I just am not having success with it, that if I can learn more about it, maybe that will be something that I'll hear something that clicks and works for me. So I want to share some things that I've learned that may or may not click and work for you, but maybe are like one more data point on your journey to overall health and well-being. And maybe you'll hear something that does click and work for you, and that would be great. So let me talk a little bit about some of the benefits of meditation, because there are so many, from neurological to psychological to physical health and well-being benefits associated with meditation that are established in the scientific research, which I found really helpful when I was having trouble starting my meditation practice, because I'm not a very like woo person, and I wasn't in it for like the woo spirituality of it. I was in it more for like the show me what this does for my brain and my body, and I want to grasp it on that level, and then maybe it becomes a spiritual practice along the way. But I needed to start with the concrete research, if that makes any sense, and maybe you're the same. So some of the neurological benefits, it has been shown to increase gray matter in the brain, so the volume of gray matter. So that's associated with staving off memory loss, staving off dementia, and that can be, of course, particularly valuable to older populations as they age. And it also enhances the connections between different areas of the brain. Psychological benefits. It has been shown to relieve subjective levels of anxiety, including social anxiety and depression. And actually, I found it fascinating. There's some research showing that mindfulness meditation in particular has an effect size of 0.3 on reducing the symptoms of depression, anxiety, and pain. And you might be thinking like 0.3, that's not very high, but that's actually the same effect size as antidepressants. So that's pretty significant if you think about it that way. And it kind of makes sense when you think about the fact that meditation is like active brain training. A lot of people, I think, have this image of like you're like a monk, like oming and like clearing yourself of all thoughts and feeling, and you're doing nothing. But that actually takes a lot of active processing to get to that point. So it's not a passive practice at all. It's very active. There's a lot of other health benefits too, physical and otherwise. So it can help with, they think it helps with addiction by enhancing the connections in the area of your brain that deal with self-control. So it's hypothesized that because those connections get stronger, we kind of like work the mental muscle of being able to like ride the wave of a craving all the way through and observe it to the very end without acting on it. So that can then help with breaking addictions of all kinds. It can also do very concrete things like lowering blood pressure, which can help reduce stress. That can also help improve your sleep and help you stay asleep for longer. It can help promote emotional health by leading to an improved self-image, especially if you're practicing metta, which is loving kindness meditation. That actually starts by practicing like, how did I word it here? Checking my notes. Yes, like developing kind thoughts and feelings first towards yourself. And then once you get comfortable with that, kind of extending that practice to extend those loving thoughts and feelings towards others, which probably first starts with people you love, like family and friends, but eventually could extend even to like enemies or just people you're not that close with, kind of just putting it out there in the universe, getting a little woo there. But I actually love that idea though. Think about if every person you encountered every day was practicing some form of structured kindness to themselves, love for themselves, and then from there bringing it out to their workplaces, to their friendships, to their family relationships, and even to maybe like a colleague they don't care for or a difficult person that they really don't mesh well with. But if we were all putting more love and kindness out into the world, how much would that collectively change all of our collective experience, right? So that's metta, M-E-T-T-A, loving kindness meditation. And again, they think that that can promote emotional health by leading to an improved self-image and a more positive outlook on life. In fact, there's actually, I thought this was fascinating, a measurable increase in electrical activity in areas of the brain related to positive thinking and optimism among meditators compared to non-meditators. So again, science behind all of this. Also, this is kind of a one-off interesting one. Meditation can actually decrease inflammation. It decreases something called cytokines, not sure how to pronounce that, cytokines, cytokines, I think, which are inflammatory chemicals that are released in stressful situations, and they impact the mood and they can lead to depression. So since it decreases those, it decreases inflammation, and decreasing inflammation in the body decreases perception of pain and even disease and symptoms of that. So it's very broad when you put it all together, all the benefits, so many. So maybe all of those established benefits in the research are making you a little bit more like, okay, this is worth like paying attention to. It's certainly not going to be detrimental. Obviously could have a lot of benefits as well. How do I actually do this? So there's a lot of ways to meditate, and there's a lot of forms of meditation. If you do a Google search, you'll find like 20 forms within 5 minutes. So I'm going to leave that aspect of it to you. But one thing I want to tell you is that much like journaling and how I talked about it last week, how there are all these benefits, all these, suggested ways to get started. It didn't really matter how you journaled. It mattered that you were doing it. And those benefits come in a plethora of ways once you're doing that practice that you've established and you've personalized to whatever your need is. That is what I have found to be true with meditation myself. I tried many times to do the whole like sitting on a cushion, crossing my legs, or like sitting in a chair with my legs on the floor, my hands on my legs, and looking 4 feet out, and I could not do it. I'm sure I could, growth mindset and all, I'm sure I could if I really tried. I'm sure there are benefits to doing it that way, but it never worked for me the way what ultimately worked for me did. And what that was literally getting up in the morning and going and getting cozy on the couch with a blankie and a pillow under my knees, half laying down, and either with my watch, the Breathe app, or just by setting a timer, just breathing, just maybe having a word that I came back to over and over again, like calm, 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 like a little mantra, or maybe thinking about nothing except my breath. And what happened for me was that I noticed how busy my mind was. Even first thing in the morning, my thoughts wanted to go anywhere but just staying and thinking about my breath. But it didn't matter. It wasn't about clearing my mind of all thought and emotion like I thought it was. It was about watching where my brain was going and then kind of going, okay, and then coming back. And when I came back, noticing, oh, I'm back. And every time I came back, instead of thinking like, why can't I just stay here? Why can't I just focus and be present? Instead, viewing that as like, oh, welcome back. Back to my breath. Here I am again. And it got easier and easier to keep coming back over time. And at the end of, initially it was 5 minutes. Then I think I worked up to like 7 or 10 minutes. Now I tend to do about 15, sometimes 20 minutes in a session. Over time, it started to feel like sort of a mental toothbrushing every time I meditated. And I would reach this sort of state where about 10 minutes in, my thoughts would slow down. And usually around the same time, my heart rate would lower. And around the same time, I would start having deeper insights and intuitions and thoughts and clarity about my thoughts about my thoughts. So getting kind of meta there. Not meta, loving kindness meditation, but meta, like metacognitive, thinking about my thoughts. And the more I did that on my couch, the more I found that out in my life, when there were these moments that were kind of like either just difficult situations or unexpected frustrations, whatever they were during my day-to-day life, I found myself getting less hooked and less emotionally reacted. I reacted less emotionally in the moment to those situations because I think the training of breathing through all these different places my thoughts wanted to go, which were kind of like little emotional upsets in my thinking, translated off the couch into my life in the form of some space, some distance that I had carved out for myself. And that was super valuable and continues to be. So I honestly, since I started doing that about a year and a half ago now, that's part of my morning routine. I get up in the morning, I take some vitamins, I start the coffee maker, and while that's all warming up, I just go and get cozy on the couch, and I'm not in a perfect posture. I usually close my eyes. There's no real structure to how I do it. My only rule for myself is to continually try to come back to my breath. And then the cool thing is once my thoughts calm down and I get that kind of like clarity and mental space at the end, that's actually a perfect time to then pick up my pen and journal about what thoughts came up for me and what maybe insights I had from that particular session. So that kind of ties this week's mindset tip into last week's as well. Of course, I think one thing too, a little bit of a side note here, a little bit of an aside. I think sometimes when we start a practice like meditation or journaling, we kind of start it thinking like, oh, this is going to improve me somehow. I'm going to like be better at whatever based on this. And meditation is really not about that. It's not about trying to become better. It's more about clearing space to become aware of what we already are and about kind of befriending who we are already. And I think a lot of times we don't know who that is because we go through life so busy, so distracted, so afraid of being alone with our own thoughts and feelings that we just don't really consider those questions. So once we finally do, once we can have that space and get to know ourselves better, it's surprising, but that's the first step, I think, a lot of times to self-love. Because when you have the space and the distance to really view yourself and your struggles and your wins and, maybe journal about them afterwards and process them more deeply, you recognize that you're doing the best you can. You recognize that you are human too, and you can't have higher expectations for yourself than you have for all the people around you every day. And the more that you are able to give yourself grace and be compassionate and empathetic with yourself, the more that you're able to extend that to other people in your life. And it just ends up being this kind of like cascade of positive impact that extends beyond yourself. So anyway, I could probably talk about this all day, but I think it's a great thing to play around with. There's so many benefits, like I talked about, psychologically, neurologically, physically. It's backed up, by spiritual experts as well as scientific research. And there's so many different ways to practice. And even though there's a lot of, this is how to meditate on the internet or wherever you look, you don't have to follow any of that. You can just do what feels right to you. And that's what I encourage you to try out this week or whenever you're ready for it. I think the more strategies like this that you have in your toolkit, maybe journaling doesn't work for you, but meditating does. Or maybe meditating's not your jam, but journaling is where it's at. So I'm going to just keep trying to share some of these strategies and tools, and maybe it's the combination of them. Maybe it's just one week, one another week, who knows. But I think all of them together or individual ones here and there, everybody's different, can really help us with becoming more comfortable with uncertainty. Anything that can kind of like slow our thoughts and feelings down so that we can get some distance from them and really process them more deeply is going to be beneficial. So I hope that helps. Sorry this one went a little bit long. I feel like I'm talking a little bit longer every week. I was actually talking to one friend who maybe is watching this. Hey, if you are, about potentially changing these mindset videos into a very low budget podcast instead. I say low budget because I just don't really have a budget for this stuff right now. I'm just kind of doing it as a hobby on steroids, but it strikes me there's no real reason for this to be a video, and you could be listening to this and going for a walk and getting your NEAT in instead. So if you happen to watch this and you got this far and you'd be interested in that, please leave me a comment and let me know that, because it sounds like a lot of work to figure out how to do a podcast, but if it would be valuable to people and if they'd be more likely to listen in that format, then I'm happy to figure that out. So anyway, I hope you have a great week. I hope that you're doing things to manage your physical energy and your mental emotional energy and thinking about your mindset during this crazy time, and just taking steps towards casting votes and making deposits towards that person that you want to be. You have everything in you need already to be successful. It's just a matter of tapping into it and becoming aware of it. Take care.